Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting to you from Washington, D.C. And in case you haven't noticed, it's scoundrel time in Washington. The legions of greed have come to town. The reactionary vultures, the exponents of Dickensian cruelty, their banner, "My money, my money, my money," and the public be damned, and humanity be damned. And we're witnessing now an orgy of the demented antics of these fanatical, crazed, petty bourgeois ideologues. And that, of course, is in the foreground. I'm referring, of course, to the new Republican majority in the House of Representatives. Now, these people have been essentially quiescent for quite a few years, but they are one of the most extreme reactionary cliques you will find anywhere in government, right? House Republicans. That was true in the 1990s, and that is true today. One of the reasons they are so extreme is that it is in the congressional district that the injection of large amounts of outside money can be decisive. This was the lesson learned by AIPAC over quite a number of decades, that the House is where some injection of money can make a big difference. And now this lesson has been embraced by the Koch brothers and their infamous Americans for Prosperity, plus this entire network of Tea Party Express, Tea Party Nation, Tea Party Patriots, Freedom Works, and all this. Complete astroturfing, right? The supposed underlying movement has long since withered and died. The organic mass leaders, such as they were, have been co-opted and corrupted. And what's left now are these ideologues. Many of these are, all-purpose hacks who have been around for decades and who simply attached themselves to this ferment when the media began touting the so-called Tea Party phenomenon. So we now have certainly bipartisan scoundrel time here in Washington, D.C., typified by the cooperation of Alice Rivlin of the Democratic Genocidal Caucus and Paul Ryan of the Republican Genocidalists. And their goal is to destroy your Medicare. They want to hurl you into eternity so that there'll be plenty of money left over for bigger and better bailouts. So we've got these Republicans. Now, obviously, the elements of comedy in the first couple of days have certainly been marked. We have the Republicans going through this posturing of reading the Constitution aloud on the House floor. Naturally, these Republicans are at war with the Constitution. They hate the Constitution. That is their hypocrisy. It's actually quite monumental. That is the one big hypocrisy with which they can then cover all of their individual crimes. But of course, they hate the General Welfare Clause, or better yet, they hate the General Welfare Clauses, because the Constitution says general welfare twice. They hate the part about Congress being able to borrow money. They don't like that. The all laws necessary and proper, so-called elastic clause, they hate that one. They hate the one about the 14th Amendment. No state can deprive you of life, liberty, property without due process of law. They hate the idea of the direct election of senators. That's not oligarchical enough for them. They hate the progressive income tax because that, of course, is a threat to entrenched oligarchical privileges and fortunes. They have a whole series of beefs with the Constitution. Their attack on the Constitution could hardly be more frontal, and therefore their hypocrisy could hardly be any greater. In the course of this, of course, it turns out that two of these legions of greed representatives were not sworn in before they went to the floor of the House to begin voting, so they violated explicit constitutional norms there. And when they were reading the Constitution, they skipped a part. Notice this. This has not been much reported. The part that they skipped is the part about the federal government having an obligation to ensure that every state will have a Republican form of government, to repel invasion against any state, and with either the request of the legislature or the governor, if the legislature is not in session, to put down domestic insurrection. So there seems to be something with that provision that the Republican reactionaries do not like. There's also the question about which version of the Constitution are you going to be reading. Now, naturally, the Republicans turn from their fundamentalist reading of the Bible, right, the notion of the literal inerrancy of every word in Scripture. They want to transfer that to this Gnostic cult around the Constitution. Again, fetishizing the words, ignoring the intent, and ignoring the historical evolution of this. But they don't want you to realize that things like the 3/5 clause have been expunged. And, of course, when you get to things like the prohibition, right, prohibition of alcoholic beverages, the basis of the Volstead Act back in 1919, 1920, they don't want to read that because then it's been repealed again by another amendment and so on down the line. So all of these problems that they run into. The other thing is now the Republicans have brought in this bill which is called repealing the job-killing health care law. Well, job-killing, I don't see the job-killing. I see people-killing. Let's talk about repeal the people-killing health care law, dear Republicans. They don't seem to be interested in that side of it. It's somehow they say that this health care law destroys jobs. I think that's a little bit complex, a little bit recherché, hard to follow. But that's what they're going to do. And in many ways, they're behaving very much like the Democrats. They believe that the mandate that they have received is a mandate for the full orgy of their ideological obsessions, just as the Democrats did, right? The Democrats came in with cap and trade when that was really not the point of the election. Everybody knows we have a depression, right? We've just had this terrible job report. Republicans ignoring that, right? They campaigned on jobs, 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 but they've talked about removing the jobs mandate, the full employment mandate from the Federal Reserve Charter, and they've talked about other things that suggest that jobs really don't mean that much to them at all. So obviously some contretemps in the beginning. The law to repeal, the bill that they have to repeal the Obamacare, essentially violates all of the principles that they have, right? There is no provision for the costs of repealing it. There are no hearings, and there is no specified constitutional authority. So the big three hobby horses that they had went out the window on precisely the first day. Anyway, these are points simply indicating the chaos and the bungling of these characters. But this is now scoundrel time. We've got saboteurs, subversives, wreckers. We've got neo-Confederates, we've got copperheads, we've got doughfaces, we've got exponents of nullification, interposition, and all the rest, right? Things that were buried at Appomattox Courthouse in April of 1865, now the night of the living dead on Capitol Hill. Obviously, one card they have to play is the shutdown of government in the springtime. They're eagerly awaiting their possibility for blackmail and extortion on that score, and of course the default of the United States. Very interesting. The Wall Street Journal editorial of Wednesday this week, the day that the gavel was passed, says that now with the Republicans, with Boner in power, it's clear that Boner will do no harm. But unfortunately, that won't be the case if Boner and company go for a default of the United States as part of a brinksmanship chicken game strategy to get the cuts that they want. We'll be back in a minute.